Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Why the Future of Enterprise AI is Agentic. My name is Batiste. I'm joining from Glean's San Francisco office, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. I am very excited to introduce you to our two excellent presenters who will be leading you through today's session, Chris Marsh from S&P Global and Emrecan Dogan from Glean. If you're curious about how this webinar came to be, Chris wrote a great piece right after we announced the launch of our new Agentic platform, and we thought we could collaborate on a community event, and here we are. Before I hand it over to our presenters, I'd like to remind everyone that this is a live interactive session, and you'll get even more out of your experience if you take some time to engage with your fellow attendees in the chat. Feel free to chime in with comments as we go. Also, this is a recorded session, and you'll receive a link to the replay in just a few days. All right, let's get started. And Emrecan, over to you.
Thank you, Baptiste. Hello, this is Emrecan. I run product org at Glean. That includes product management, design, and also data. I've been at Glean for about 2 years. I'm joining from my home in Menlo Park. It's great to be here. Thanks a lot, Chris, for sharing the stage with me. On to you.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you, Emrecan, and hello to everyone joining us today. Thanks to Baptiste for kicking this off. So I'm Chris Marsh. I've been an industry analyst for 15 years, and over that period, I've obviously witnessed the transformations from SaaS and mobile to cloud, and obviously now AI. I currently manage one of the research teams here in 451 Research. 451 is actually part of the wider market intelligence division of S&P Global. So S&P Global, our parent company. And I think I'm kicking us off today. So without further ado, let's dive in. So as I open up this presentation, this conversation, I'd like you, as you're kind of listening in the audience, just to think and ask yourself, how are you imagining the role of AI agents in, transforming how work happens in your organization, how you collaborate across your organization, and what opportunities do you envision, and what challenges do you think you'll potentially face in this shift? So my top line message that I'll be sort of going through over the next sort of 7-8 minutes or so before I hand the ball to Emrecan is really that AI adoption is rapidly mainstreaming. The levels of interest in this sort of next wave around AI, of agentic AI, is really palpable. And I'll show some very interesting data to sort of evidence that. And while, of course, there are challenges, companies I think are really looking at a broad range of potential gains as we sort of transition into this agentic AI phase. So let's start by looking at some of the sort of key overall data, top line data around AI adoption. So a substantial majority of organizations are either deploying AI already or trialing projects, whether that's through pattern recognition, rules-based systems, generative AI. The trend is clearly shown with those dark blue bars that you can see on the visual. So that's a combination of organizations that have already deployed AI or have projects in pilot mode. Specifically, if you look at those bottom two bars around generative AI, which really is a powerful precursor and I would say complementary technology to agentic AI when it comes to the potential to impact ways of working, 3/4 of organizations expect to have implemented generative AI by the end of this year. So this survey was essentially done at the very end of 2024. And an additional 17% say that they'll have generative AI projects in pilot mode. So that's the combination of those two things is really 89% on that very bottom bar. So notably, nearly half of the organizations who will have deployed generative AI will be doing so not in isolated pockets, but in full implementation across their operations. So really interesting, rapid adoption of these new technologies as part of this shift. So widespread interest and investments going into generative AI. Again, we'll address some of the sort of AI challenges later. We've got some specific data that Emrecan and I are going to sort of talk over. But as can be seen here, organizations are really optimistic overall about the potential for this technology to enhance operational efficiencies, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, revenue growth, effective risk management, and sort of other key outcomes. And as can be seen with the sort of different use cases here. So this is really, where organizations who are deploying this technology say they're actually finding meaningful value in terms of sort of ROI on those investments. You can see it's really widespread, right? So, different use case areas here, whether that's getting more value from their data, assisting in research and idea generation, content creation, better managing knowledge across their organization, triaging tasks, doing more complex kinds of process automation. I think as we look ahead, the sort of next frontier really is going to be characterized by a convergence of different advancements, right? So we're already seeing more sophisticated AI systems that integrate large language models, LLMs, with external data sources, richer reasoning abilities, the capacity, obviously, with agentic AI to autonomously execute actions. And so if we just step back a moment, we've got a number of different things happening here. We have things like code, data, content generation through generative AI. We have big tailwinds at the moment behind AI-powered information retrieval, search, knowledge management. That's been a big topic over the past sort of 18 months. And then, of course, with agentic AI assisting with the automation of tasks and increasingly sophisticated kinds of collaboration that can happen across multiple business systems. These aren't siloed trends, I guess, is one of the main first points that I would make as part of this conversation. I think really it's at the intersection of these things that organizations are beginning to see the potential for significant changes, positive changes in terms of ways of working across their organization. So how did we arrive at this point? This hasn't sprung out of nowhere. This has been a progression. I'm guessing some of this will look familiar to those of you sort of dialing in and listening in. So we've had for a good while traditional chatbots, that can handle simple queries. That matured into more intelligent chatbots that use things like NLP to better understand user intent. That has sort of evolved into this first generation, I guess, of AI assistants that combine, traditional methods around automation with LLMs to support things like information retrieval, summarization, content generation. That quickly evolved into sort of more fully fledged co-pilots and semi-agentic solutions where really humans are still the primary driver. They're still the primary sort of agency when it comes to executing actions. But this is also where we've seen introduce, new kinds of capability when it comes to workflow planning, to integration, to orchestration. And obviously now we have agentic AI around which there is very high levels of interest from enterprises with, new kinds of platforms that are merging different algorithms, language models, RAG, and other techniques to learn from data, to better understand and leverage context, to be able to reason around that context, all of which can be deployed by organizations to, gain some kind of specific outcome, specified goal with greater intelligence and potentially with less human intervention needed, depending on the workflow, of course. And, as we sort of continue through this maturity curve, we're seeing new advancements, right? It's a time of rapid innovation in this space. And so we're seeing lots of innovation around, more refined agent building environments, the ability to manage different diverse types of structured and unstructured information, and enhanced capabilities for things like agent governance, agent orchestration, resource allocation, along with other kinds of sophisticated functionality that we're seeing come to market. The interest in AI agents is really palpable, as I said at the start. All of the data I've been showing you to this point comes from one of our big AI use cases survey, which goes out to folks within enterprises who are actually responsible for making decisions around AI strategy, AI projects, and the various technologies that are supporting those. So this is really interesting sort of data from the field. And as you can see, when it comes to agents, 58% of organizations say they're actively seeking opportunities to implement agents. And another 40%, that light green bar, say that they're interested in getting started and doing the same. So really that leaves 1% who are undecided and 1% who are not interested. So this is pretty much universal interest. And when this sort of data first came out of field, we were comparing it to other technology shifts that we've seen happen. And I don't think there's been a time when there is such sort of profound, broad-based interest in a new sort of way of thinking about workflows and automation and technologies that are going to impact how people work. So really widespread interest. Each organization has obviously its own outcomes in mind. But if we sort of try and extrapolate what those sort of main value areas are that enterprises are really thinking about when they're contemplating where agents fit in the equation, I think there's sort of 5 broad areas, right? The first is operational excellence, so driving better operational practices, efficiencies, effectiveness. So, this is where organizations are thinking about, how do we enhance productivity across the workforce? How do we deliver better service quality to our customers? And as part of that, how do we bring in more automation of repetitive tasks? How do we allow human resources that we have to focus on more strategic kinds of activities to improve those experiences? So I think operational excellence is the sort of, first big bucket. I think there are organizations also looking at sort of cost optimization. So, agentic process automation that's focused on reducing labor costs and labor errors with the hope of achieving, significant savings. I think the third sort of big bucket is just everything data-driven decision making, right? We see lots of evidence from across the surveys that, organizations want better ways to more rapidly analyze and draw insights from, big volumes of data across their organization to better understand insights from all of that context provided by the data, so that they can drive better decisions, better decision making across the organization. I would say the fourth sort of big bucket area of these kind of 5 big value areas is sort of innovation, right? We see lots of interesting takes from enterprises where they're looking at AI agents and a potential future of sort of pervasive AI agents, and looking at the potential of having essentially 24/7 agents to manage increased workloads, to potentially better manage resource allocation practices, so that they can sort of be more responsive to market changes. So innovation and agent tools to help scale innovation, to get over some of the obstacles that existed prior to this age, I think is another big driver. And then the sort of fifth one is everything customer centric, right? So it's driving more personalized customer interactions. It's making assistance more responsive based on user behavior, obviously with the goal of driving all of those sort of CX metrics, whether that's customer satisfaction, loyalty, retention, etc. So just finally, before I pass the ball, really interestingly, and I'm not showing this data on this slide, but I'll just talk over it. Really interestingly, employees are enthusiastic about this shift. So we have another survey, an employee survey, that also came out of field about a month ago, so pretty fresh data. And what it showed is that 2/3, I think it's 67% of employees say they're excited about essentially collaborating with AI agents, where those agents can take over specific aspects of their work. So there is some concern about, job redefinition, job displacement, but that is relatively small compared to the 2/3 who say, actually, I'm excited about this. I think this is going to be positive. It's going to allow us to focus on different things. And a lot of the manual work that we're still bogged down in, the sort of work about the work often, we can actually assign to this sort of agent workforce. So that's interesting. I think specifically what these levels of interest from both decision makers and employees means in the near term is some of what you're seeing on this visual, right? It's a focus on where agents can help with data entry and analysis, with task and process automation as the kind of priorities that you can see there at the top of this chart. And then there's a range of use cases that they're seeing potential for also, whether that's customer service, learning and training, content creation, and other areas. So hopefully that was, help set the scene. And, I'm excited to hand off to Emrecan, who's going to bring in Glean's perspective on how to sort of drive AI and agent adoption across your organization. So Emrecan, over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. That was an excellent overview of the current state of the market and where we are going, where enterprises are going regarding AI adoption. Chris, I will go back to one of your slides here to just emphasize or make sure we get it right. Like the advent of Gen AI, the rise of the GPT is about 3 years old. And I don't know if everybody in the audience got to notice the very top of this bar chart here. It is amazing. We are talking about enterprises. We are talking about business software, entities of CIOs. And at the very end of this bar chart, there is only tiny 2% that says, hey, we are not interested in AI agents or assistants, right? So I have been building B2B software, enterprise software for such a long time. Think about how fast or slow enterprises adopted cloud, for example, and compare that to the rise of AI and agents. It is astounding that we are in a state where literally just 2% of enterprises are saying, hey, we are in a holding pattern. We still want to wait and see whether there is value, whether we should adopt it, etc. It's astounding. So for the next few minutes and slides, what I want to do now is to zoom in on what it will look like to build this agentic feature in our organizations. Not at the executive CIO level necessarily, but actually across the entire spectrum, entire layer of enterprise in a bottoms-up grassroots motion as well. At Glean, we got the opportunity to work with some of the world's most forward-thinking companies. And it has become very clear that agents cannot be treated as yet another set of tools where you make a decision on, hey, should we buy this piece of software or not? It requires more fundamental thinking. It requires going above some key repeated blockers. I think Chris touched upon them already, but I want to double down into them in a more qualitative, anecdotal, jobs to be done sense, as we engage with new Glean prospects and customers, and then run into these obstacles, these speed traps, and then as we power through, we unlock the magic of AI and agents in the enterprise. So maybe let's start with that, right? So before we get into something specific about Glean and how AI is being used, let's talk about getting AI implemented in the enterprise and making it work so that users start seeing value. So number one, I'll talk through a set of pain points that are very much repeated and seen across enterprises, big, small, tech, non-tech, etc. So one aspect is the whole definition of work and enterprises as employees. We have found ways to get stuff done. Like the only way to do my job at work is there are repeated problems, and then I have some repeatable process, patterns, ways of approaching it. This is from how I triage my inbox, to how I start a project, to how I deal with a project that is maybe falling behind, to how I write postmortems, how I do performance reviews. Many things that we do at enterprise is repeated, and therefore we have come up with our own heuristics, ways of doing things like patterns, workflows, templates, etc. So when we think about shifting the user behavior and rethinking these processes with the use of AI, that presents an issue, because when you are about to do that thing, if you say, hey, let me try AI to do this thing right now, you might actually feel that you are slowing down, because the things you have done all the time, you have already subscribed to a way of working, and then you might feel that you are becoming inefficient when you try to configure AI, get the right system working, and you might say, hey, AI is not useful. But once you actually get over this barrier, then you unlock a whole new layer, whole new level of effectiveness. Second, when we are using AI as a consumer, it is fairly simple to use them. But when we think about using AI in the enterprise, the AI cannot work in vacuum, in isolation. In the enterprise, there are so many complex workflows across different software stack, different departments, how different departments work with each other. There is this highly idiosyncratic, bespoke way every enterprise has built its own systems, its own way of working. So when we think about how AI needs to operate in the enterprise, there is no global way of doing things, right? The AI needs to adapt to the very custom, under the hood nature of how things get done in the enterprise. And finally, when we think about consumer AI gets better by accessing the world's all public knowledge, right? The better search you do across the public web, the better AI could work potentially. But in the enterprise, not everybody has access to the same data. We have this whole concept of permissions. Data is siloed in different systems, and the same single AI usually doesn't get to access every single data artifact in every system. So there is this notion of, hey, do we have all the data, but also are we making sure that the employees can only access the data they are permitted to access? So all these three that I have walked through are some leading, let's say, speed traps that make it more difficult or questionable for enterprises to adopt AI. And this is where we actually come in with Glean. But if we imagine that these problems can be solved, and Glean solves them today gracefully for a slew of enterprise, again, big and small, different geographies, different tech stacks, the really magical thing is, how do we start that AI flywheel? If you know about flywheels, the hardest part of the flywheel is when it is not spinning. So the whole concept of a flywheel is the more it starts turning, then the easier and faster it becomes. So when an enterprise is at point zero of AI, no employee is getting value, and therefore the enterprise itself is not getting value. So we do believe that this is very much an individual employee motion to kickstart things. And we have heard it time and again from our customers, from our prospects, that making AI work requires employees to chip in, to adopt AI, to craft it, to curate it, experiment with it, see what is working, maybe iterate to make it better, and then bring others on board. So this is where in the enterprise, it's extremely important to identify who are the AI first, AI native, AI forward employees, and equip them with the right technology, with the right experimentation, with the right tools and templates to start getting value in day one, so that they can actually bring their colleagues into this world. They can help accelerate teams to adopt AI, and all of a sudden you are seeing different departments are adopting AI and expanding, proliferating all these use cases. But then this becomes a magical flywheel. So on day one, not every employee in a 100,000 employee organization needs to build AI, craft AI, but there needs to be enough creators, enough tinkerers to create this flywheel and then have the spillover effects, getting to other colleagues and other teams and other departments. So as we move forward, then when we think about how to think about AI for every company and what are the big buckets of, let's say, enablers or assets to bring into the world of AI so that AI can keep on giving for every team, every employee, every department, every use case. Another slide I loved from Chris's part was this highly colorful chart of so many different use cases and the levels of adoption or interest for each. So if you think about how these use cases are powered, they are powered by people, data, and the processes. So the more we can actually unlock the value in each, then the more magical we can unlock AI. Because these, let's say, how people relate to each other is one aspect of things, but also how people relate to different processes and how people relate to different data, like who is a customer, who is a partner, who is a vendor. And this is how we unlock the system of context for AI agents to tap into and then do their most magical work in every single enterprise. So when we think about crafting Glean to account for this richness, this idiosyncrasy, these relationships between different assets, we come to this notion of Glean operating as a system of context. So this system of context, very different than how Google, for example, sees the open web, where it is one singular universal context. Within a single enterprise, everything is custom, bespoke, idiosyncratic, right? And so it is not enough to actually build one universal common context for all the enterprises combined. What you're going to do is almost create an independent, unique system of context for each enterprise so that each project, each person, their title, their organizational understanding is tied to each other. So let's look into some cases here. When we think about the enterprise knowledge graph, this is the piece of technology that is so unique and important, critical for Glean to deliver its value. We layer this as understanding of how people are organized, how they work with each other, collaborate with each other, creating documents, artifacts, code, how they search, what they click on, what they do not, what comments they put on to documents, how fast when you receive a message on Microsoft Teams or Slack or email, which email you pick to respond faster versus not, and how you respond. So these are all what we call the context, the knowledge graph. And imagine the following. I'll mention a company that I actually love, Databricks. So imagine Databricks in Glean's context. Databricks could be a customer of Glean, but also Databricks could be a partner, a product partner of Glean, which they are both. And on top, Databricks could be a vendor to Glean. So how to represent different people's relationships to an entity like Databricks, where, hey, Emrecan as head of product works with Databricks because there's a great product partnership going on, versus an account exec at Glean works with certain other people in Databricks because Databricks is a customer. And Databricks is also a software stack. So some engineers at Glean could be responsible for integrating Databricks for our data lake solution. So these are all the richness and idiosyncrasy of how enterprise knowledge graph should be structured. So Glean understands that multifaceted, multi-layered approach and the relationships between entities. And it does it automatically, it does it continuously, and it does it with no human intervention. So this knowledge graph is continuing to be built and updated for our enterprise customers, and all with zero oversight from Glean employees, so that we can actually uphold security, governance, and privacy needs and requirements of the enterprise. So far, I have explained how different assets, different vectors in the enterprise data come together. But there's also a very, very deep personal notion of things. And this is what we call the personal graph. So imagine how you idiosyncratically work to get your job done. I'll give you an example from my own organization, as I manage product managers, data scientists, designers. Among product managers, we do not expect that everybody does their job in a very common way, right? The richness, the creativity of a product organization comes from the fact that product manager A and product manager B, they bring their own idiosyncratic selves, and then they apply their creativity and decision-making in a certain way. So that richness helped the company drive the forward innovation and customer satisfaction. At least in the product world, this is what I can attest to. So when we think about the personal graph, it is important that compared to what I shared just earlier, understanding the connections between projects and customers and people in the organization, we got to layer on the richness of how each person get their job done slightly differently, so that when AI agents are built and invoked and used, these AI agents can tap into that particular ways of doing things for different employees. Another way of saying this is, when we think about an agent, the agent's behavior sometimes, especially when it's a departmental agent, it must be maybe designed to be uniform across all employees, whether it is a customer service agent using that agent or it's a product manager. But there are many agents in the enterprise where the behavior of the agent need to be customized, need to be optimized for the end user invoking that agent, so that when I'm using it, the agent behaves in the way that I need, versus when Chris or Baptiste is using it, then the agent can adapt to their ways of working. So that is the richness and power of bringing AI to the enterprise. Team, for the last maybe few minutes, I mostly focused on the stack, the technology to enable AI. But what I want to then shed light on and switch gears into a bit is, okay, now that enterprises actually go through the adoption cycle, kickstart the flywheel, then what are they building? How are they crafting AI, using agents to unlock value for different employees, for different departments, for different use cases? Remember, earlier, Chris showed us that AI is not actually helping solve one leading use case. The amazing thing about AI is that the value is widely distributed to many departments, to many use cases. So it's a long tail opportunity for most enterprises. And it's not very surprising, because remember what I told you about the complexity and the subjectivity of getting things done in every company. Because they are slightly different, sometimes wildly different, then the magic of AI is actually driven by that long tail adoption. So as we look at the top use cases, the repeated use cases across our customers, I can shed light on some. So here I am sharing a few departments, from sales to engineering to IT and HR, and sharing some examples where for many customers across Glean's customer portfolio, we are seeing repeated usage, repeated buildup of agents. Let's take some examples. Let's start from sales. For example, call preparation or updating CRM records. AI provides an amazing natural language interface for many more salespeople to prepare for their calls. Like, imagine the following: I am on my commute and I have a call prep or coaching agent that is aware of my calendar. In my commute, I want to be on a, let's say, voice mode primarily. Then as I lead to my meeting, I can actually get AI to coach me, not in a very generic sense of how to get my sales call done well, but in actually a very bespoke, optimized sense for that particular customer, their objection reasons, their needs and challenges, so that I can actually leverage AI just like a human coach for my job. So in a similar way, if we think about engineering, pull requests, there's an amazing opportunity to automate all or most parts of the pull request flywheels, where as an engineer, I might write some new code as part of my project. I submit it as a pull request. Now, in a 5,000 people engineering organization, the right engineers should review that PR and maybe approve it or give me feedback. And even before that, maybe that PR should be assessed for general guidelines on the best code writing practices specific to that company. So you can imagine that AI agents can come in a very powerful, forceful way here. And this is what we are seeing across our customers. But mind you, the same agentic use case, the PR review agent, from one company to the other, there are actually sometimes slight or major differences how the agent is configured, how it is constructed, the steps it needs to take. or the level of autonomy it brings to the table. Whether you want to build an agent to fully approve PRs based on some risk or severity level, or you want the agent to only give feedback and help the PR reviewers do a faster job. So these are all sliders that different companies settle on. But the amazing thing is there are so many repeated use cases across the enterprise, and then there is a lot of richness on how one enterprise does it a bit differently than the other. So then this is where I think agents become magical, because it provides that amazing versatility to customize AI from one company to the other, one department to the other, but still make it very natural, very user-friendly to build, craft, iterate, and deploy. I'm hoping some of these were useful, but maybe this is time where we bring Chris back and then engage in a more open-ended discussion. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, sounds good. So let's sort of open this discussion. We're going to have some time for Q&A. I was looking through the sort of chat function in this webcast platform, some interesting questions submitted, so we'll get to those in a minute. Let's just spend a couple of minutes, Emrecan, talking about sort of security, compliance, and some of the other kind of technical and other challenges, change management challenges that come into the equation when companies are working on their AI projects. There's been a couple of questions from the audience related to a couple of these pillars, so we can ask those as well. I mean, so this data again is from the same survey that much of the other data I showed came from. So this is a panel of senior decision makers when it comes to sort of AI strategies within enterprises. And as you can see, a host of different challenges here that they're reporting. So 68% say it's some kind of technical challenge that is their main primary challenge when they're thinking about AI projects. And you can see the different kinds of technical challenge there. About the same proportion state sort of compliance and security risks. Interestingly, on the sort of right, there's some organizational resistance in some companies to actually going down this route. And then governance issues, budget limitations. So we can talk about how to think through some of these issues. But I guess for me, when I saw this data, it feels like many of the common challenges that come with sort of new technology shifts, right? It's ultimately concerns about fragmentation and silos, about reliability and trust. It's about how to engineer solutions. Like I remember when mobile was the new thing, it was like, do we have one big app? Do we have lots of task-oriented smaller apps? So it's not hugely dissimilar from the kind of things that people have to think about now. How to train users on these technologies. So how do you feel about this, Emrecan? Does this feel about right? What are you seeing amongst enterprises in terms of what they're preoccupied with?
I love it, and I love your mobile analogy as well. Like every one of these buckets, they are so spot on. And when I engage with our prospects, it is highly likely one of these buckets or one of the lines in these buckets end up being the leading speed trap, leading objection to adopting AI. So I wish we had more time so that I could speak to every one of these buckets, but maybe something coming top of mind to me, Chris, is if you think about the security and compliance posture, especially for larger enterprises, when we get to the table, a major concern arises, and it's the following. Hey, so far we have relied on obscurity as security paradigm as our protection. Hey, it is so hard to find all documents in our IT stack that we don't know if we got the permissions right, but at least it is very difficult to find it. And all of a sudden, when you get into AI, then anybody can ask any question to, let's say, Glean, for example, to say, hey, show me the salary tables of, I don't know, the product department. And maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, somebody left a document out there. But once it was so hard to find that document, like imagine the company was so small back then, so it was shared as open to everybody. But like nobody needed to get to that document since. But now the company is 20,000 people, and that document just scaled to 20,000 people because of that permission. And then the companies would say, hey, with Glean is a powerful tool. Now finding such documents becomes so easy. It is not a problem like Glean is introducing, but then we run into this, hey, obscurity is no longer a security protection for you. So then, in this case, there are two paths, right? One is companies that want to go forward with AI, then they adopt more and more active governance solutions so that they can actually rely on more AI to continuously look at the enterprise data corpus, identify overshaped documents, sensitive documents, and then have AI agents either surface them or maybe automatically remedy them, like turn down their permissions. Or I sometimes hear, hey, our data stack is a mess. Let us do some cleaning. Let us transform our data, and we'll come back to the table in a year or two. This is really the bad posture. Because you know what? Like, enterprises will never clean their data. It's the living corpus. So like Glean accepts, and I think all enterprise AI solutions should do, Glean accepts the data as it is in its messy form. And then we gotta build the right security governance flows so that enterprises can adopt the AI now. So this is, I think, one crucial aspect.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, we have actually some really interesting supporting evidence for that focus, as a primary focus from the surveys. In fact, organizations that experience lower AI project failure rates are significantly more likely to prioritize compliance risk and data availability as criteria when they're prioritizing which projects to invest in. So that comes out clearly in the data. So obviously putting compliance at the forefront, you can mitigate the risks and enhance the chances of successful deployment. Maybe we'll just stay on this topic for 1 second before we look at some of the other questions as well, Emrecan, because there's been a couple from the audience around, and I'm just reading one from Helen. So I'm most curious, she says, about how Glean supports governance and privacy while working across different tools in the business. There's been a couple around that topic. Do you just want to kind of double down a little bit on that, and then we can think about some of the other areas as well?
Yeah, would love to, team. It might not look like that today, but when Glean was founded, it was founded on a set of very contrarian and then deep, let's say, product paradigms. When we were founded, there was actually no like Gen AI boom in the works, and then we focused on enterprise search across every single one of the IT stack that an enterprise relies on. Mind you, not an SMB, not a digital native startup. We focused on the enterprise IT stack from the get-go. And we also said, hey, Glean is a pure system of intelligence. We don't let customers create data on Glean, write documents on Glean, change permissions on Glean. Glean's magic, Glean stack is built on what we call data foundations or connectors and the cloud infrastructure, whose only job is to actually connect to every single IT software, every single data tool, understand its permissions, not just once, but understand it continuously, so that if I make a change to the permission structure of a document right now, Glean understands those changes within minutes and then updates its index. And then to this day, the largest part of Glean's engineering team is actually for our what we call data infrastructure, security, and governance, because it's the lifeblood of Glean. So I think the key paradigm here is we never replicate the permissions on our side. We always read from the underlying sources. We build our own integrations and connectors always in-house, and we continuously look for it. And on top, as I mentioned earlier, we maintain a very versatile, rich governance protection stack. We call it Glean Protect, to look for continuous, let's say, regressions or overshared, undershared, sensitive documents and artifacts.
Awesome, that's great. There's a couple of interesting questions around, essentially on the theme of like, how do you get started? How do you get traction going? So maybe a sort of two-part question. Should the goal be to have everyone build agents in your organization? You mentioned earlier in your comments that, you need at least enough creators to get the flywheel going. But like, if we sort of fast forward a couple of years, what do you think it looks like in terms of who's building these agentic workflows? And then maybe the sort of second part to that question comes from Josh, actually, in the audience. So he said, regarding overcoming the initial flywheel inertia, what are some of the common sort of aha moments that get companies going? So I guess a two-part, like ultimately who's going to be building these agentic workflows, and how do you sort of get started and get over that initial inertia?
Love it. Tim, the very, very clear questions for an enterprise to adopt AI and get to value. Not every employee needs to build agents at all, but it is in the best interest of every employee to dip their toes in building agents. So I think the agents movement and AI movement, Chris, in my mind, is very similar to the movement around Microsoft Excel. Like imagine how much Microsoft Excel democratized the ability to build as a knowledge worker. It is such an amazing interface. Even to this day, there are more people like writing stuff, creating Microsoft Excel than people writing code. So that's one. Another thing is how AWS democratized software building. Like all of a sudden, you don't need on-prem servers, etc. So you can actually bring to life what you imagined as a software engineer. So it unlocked a huge slew of like explosion. So not every person building Excel becomes the departmental leader on Excel adoption. Similarly, AWS. So here, that's what I am thinking here. You actually need a very small crowd that are building departmental level agents. So that's fine. The way to unlock them is to bring an agent library, agent templates that they can adopt from day one. That's what we are focused on with Glean. Employees don't start from scratch. They actually get a very fast growing library of agents. Today, maybe it is at the level of like 60 or 70, that they can in one click adopt an agent, start running it, and then start iterating on it. But then I think the key notion is every employee needs to experiment with AI and then build agents, not to get to a clear outcome, but to learn how AI works so that they can actually become AI native. So this is how I would make the distinction here.
Yeah, super interesting. I would maybe just add an additional perspective on that. I mean, one of the things we track in some of our employee surveys is the sort of rise of ops roles, right? So folks within BUs that either formally have like a sales ops or marketing ops or people ops, or sort of unofficially are the ones who have kind of taken on some of the responsibility to kind of manage, workflow design and process design. I mean, we've seen a really interesting shift over the past couple of years where IT is saying, actually, from the perspective, we can address the governance issues, of which there are some, of course, but we're actually, looking at it as a positive that there are now technologies that enable folks within BUs to do things that would otherwise fall on our plate that we don't have the resource and capacity to do. And so there's a sort of growing acceptance of that kind of role, from the point of app creation, app integration, process automation, doing some of the data governance around it. So I think there's a ready audience that has grown over the past several years that are perfect for sort of taking on these agentic tools. Maybe just one really quick last question. I know we're sort of almost at the end of the time. Any other thoughts, Emrecan, in terms of, culturally, what can organizations do to sort of pave the path towards agentic AI? So we've talked a little bit about who does it and how to address some of the kind of common AI challenges. Anything else from a sort of, operational culture perspective that it's worth saying?
So I think one, maybe identifying the AI champions, like the right people in the organization that are, again, dipping their toes. Maybe they are using some off-the-shelf prosumer type of an AI tool to get some stuff done. And maybe instead of like IT flagging that person and then cutting down excess, like leaning into that energy and then figuring out like how to actually nurture these AI forward, AI native folks, and then give them more tools for experimentation, if not nothing else. Second, as employees start building some things, it is very there is a very lagging factor in other employees discovering things. So as executives, how do they actually highlight the up and coming use cases, the emergent maybe AI implementations in company town halls, in companies' newsletters, highlight them in the intranet is the second. Third, again, like if we think about the enterprise is really a bundle of repeated workflows, processes, from annual planning to quarterly planning, to OKRs, to like vendor onboarding systems. So then as execs, they have to, I think, highlight, hey, what are the repeatable things that are already happening that we should actually try to bring AI? Like right now, Glean is going through, let's say, performance cycle. And then we pushed it very hard to see how we can write agents to augment people as they do their own performance reviews. So these opportunities are boundless because, again, to my mind, enterprise is nothing but a bundle of like repeated workflows every single day, every single week. So there's ample opportunity to connect the dots here with AI and these workflows.
Perfect. I think that's probably all we have time for. Thank you for everyone for submitting questions, some really good ones there. Baptiste, if I can bring you back in just to help wrap this up.
Yep. Thank you so much, you two. I will just start this poll. Yes, as you said, we're running out of time, but thank you again for joining us today, everybody. This was great. We hope you enjoyed this discussion on why the future of enterprise AI is agentic. We hope we answered that question. I think we did. If you're interested in learning more about how Glean can help you and your team put AI to work at work, let us know and we'll be happy to follow up with you. Just answer yes to the poll I just launched and we'll follow up with you. Chris, Emrecan, thank you again for your time. This was fantastic. And we hope to do this again in the future, maybe, if you're up to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.
Bye. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks.